Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Alba Monn. Her book is called Proof of Eternity, and she doesn't want to be shown on the screen today. So we're going to respect her wishes, and she has a fascinating story. Hi, Alba.
Hello, hi everyone.
So
I want to share.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead and share.
Okay, I had a shared near-death experience together with my daughter, and we both were in a life-threatening situation right after an accident. And we were taken finally to two different clinics in two different ICUs. My daughter was resuscitated because she was clinically dead, and I had to have an emergency operation, and I was in the ICU in the intensive care unit when my NDE started. The problem was that right after the accident, my husband and I had a problem that he didn't understand how severe our physical condition was. And I told him we have to go to the next hospital immediately. And he was in a state of shock and he left in his car. So because I had a toddler with me, I had to get a hold of him, call him and make him come back home and take us to the hospital to look after my toddler daughter as well. And because I already knew that I would have to stay in the clinic. And so I was very, very upset. I was angry and I had a lot of accusations against my husband. And I had not told anyone. I had not told my husband about my feelings. I hadn't told anyone in the hospital, of course. And so in the ICU, I was confronted with a situation that meant that I had to go through all that by myself. And I had no idea I was still in life danger because there were some problems with my emergency operation. So the doctors decided they don't want for me to die on the operating table. They decided to sew me up against the rules and put me in the ICU without telling anyone else that I was still in life danger. So they were just trying to save themselves from problems, from medical problems and accusations. And I had no idea I was still bleeding internally to death.
Alba,
And when yeah.
what caused this? Was it a car wreck or what? Why were you and your daughter?
No, I had an accident. Actually, I slipped in my bathroom at home. So I fell onto the bathtub, onto the edge of the bathtub with my pregnant belly. And my daughter was still unborn at the time of the accident.
I see.
My emergency operation was an emergency cesarean section. And my daughter was delivered when she was clinically dead. And then she was resuscitated and taken to another clinic. And so we were physically separated about an hour's drive apart at the time when my NDE occurred.
Okay.
In my NDE, my daughter contacted me, and with her help, I was taken to the other side. I was taken to a hall of truth. I saw the door of life. I saw the scales of life, and I saw the way that our life results are measured, analyzed, and judged on the other side. And after that, I came to another setting on my favorite place on earth, and there was a wooden fence telling me that there was one step over to the other side and I wouldn't be able to come back for good. But I was catapulted back into my ICU before I could go through that fence. So it wasn't my decision to come back. I was just put back in my physical body right after my NDE. And it was not my decision, but I was very happy about it because it was in my best interest. when it happened. My daughter was a newborn child on Earth. She was severely handicapped because she was clinically dead for a long amount of time. The doctors told me later that she would have never regained consciousness. She had no brain functions. She only had a heartbeat, and she wasn't even able to breathe on her own. So she was totally devastated, as you know, concerning her body as a child on Earth. But in my NDE, she started to appear. I felt a presence behind my bed, and she started to talk to me in a telepathic way, and trying to contact me, and asking me to forgive him. And I immediately knew that she meant my husband, because my biggest accusations were, towards my husband abandoning me and his own child. And so we had this telepathic discussion about me forgiving him. She wanted for me to do that, and I didn't see any point in that. I had no idea that it would concern me in any way. I had no idea I was about to die. And after that, after it all occurred, I already realized she was trying to save me spiritually from dying in a state of the most negative emotions possible. And so she was trying actually to save me. But for some reason, I don't think she was allowed to tell me that. So she had to go about it, just trying to make me do it with some explanations that she was allowed to give me. And
Dying
in our
with
conversation,
negative emotions. That's impactful.
yes, yes, that was the big problem that I had to face, because I was, until this day, I was pretty content with my life. I considered myself a good person uh, in the way that I would judge myself. I was content with my life up to then. But in this situation around this accident, my husband abandoning us, and, in this whole turmoil, I was upset, and I had accusations not only against my husband, but also against my fate and against God. I was accusing God of being so unfair to let me experience something like that. It felt like the biggest punishment possible, because I had to see my dead baby girl on screen. When I had checkups in the clinic, I saw her on the ultrasound with a heart that didn't move. I mean, it was the worst thing anyone could ever imagine to see. And I didn't only have to see that she was dead once, but she died after my NDE a second time. So I had 2 deaths of my daughter within a few hours, and then 2 emergency operations within a few hours as well. Because after my NDE, I was able to forgive my husband in the end, in my NDE. And I think that's why I was saved. That's why I was sent back. And that saved my life. And just wanting to survive for my 2 older children, and to go on and make them happy for the rest of their life, as long as I would be able to be with them, was the purpose that I had taken with me from my NDE. And I felt right after my NDE that I had been forgiven just the way that I had forgiven my husband. And that was so unexpected, because in the Hall of Truth, I was confronted with all the sins that I had committed up to this point in my life. And it was devastating to see that all these negative emotions and the accusations, obviously in the last hour of your life or so, are of tremendous impact. And that's what you take with you when you transition. So it meant that I was not only in physical life danger, I was in spiritual life danger. And that's what my daughter saved me from, essentially.
Wow. It just makes me feel like we need to be working with people at the end of life on making that transition based on
Yes,
what you're saying, so people are at a good place when they pass, because it
I
sounds so
understood.
important.
Yes, I understood afterwards. I realized that I had been so lucky to have this help from my daughter, because without her, I could have never made it. And I didn't even understand. She gave me so many reasons why I should forgive my husband in our telepathic discussion, but still was not ready to make this connection that it would concern my own fate, on the other side directly. And I said to her, philosophically speaking, I understand that forgiveness is, something good, but it just didn't click. I had no idea I was doomed without it. I just didn't realize that. And then she even appeared to me physically on the visitor's chair in my ICU room. She was sitting, in my intensive care unit. There was a little visitor's chair, and she appeared to me as a grown-up woman in her prime time of her life. I was already a little bit shocked about the situation, in my telepathic discussion. I felt the presence of a grown-up person behind my bed. So I knew it was my child, it was my daughter, but I had no idea why she would not be a baby girl at that point. Later on, when I was thinking about it, I of course realized that she wouldn't have been able to, get in touch with me, not able to speak with me. Just as a baby, she would be helpless to connect with me in any sensible way. And so when she appeared on the visitor's chair, I was a little bit overwhelmed, because she looked, with an old-fashioned hairdo, with an old-fashioned clothing. I was a little bit taken aback, because I had no idea why somebody like her would appear, in the body of a person. From what I later did some research on it, and I found that she must have been dressed, and her hairdo looked like the Roaring '20s. So she must have, I don't know, picked up an appearance from the Roaring '20s.
Maybe
And
it's her past life. I don't know.
I I thought about that later on, because I did not think too much about, past lives until my NDE occurred. But later on, I realized that it must have been some connection to her own past. And I think I'm, I'm sensitive with those topics. So I had 3 premonition dreams before my NDE occurred and before my daughter died. I had 3 dreams that prepared me for the death of my child in the future. And even when I was very young, like at the age of 12 and 17, and at the age of 21, I had 3 other premonitions that were no dreams, but I had the feeling that one of my children would die in the future. And I had no idea why I would feel like that, but it was just something that was, told to me, because I think in one of the dreams I got an explanation. There was an angel that said he had come to warn me and console me in this dream. And it was a dream nearly 8 years to the day of her death. So it had even some connection, in the circle of a year. So I was a little bit prepared for something to happen in the future, but it was overwhelming later on. I had found so many details in these dreams that even that were connected directly to some of the content of the accident and of the content of my daughter dying, without me in another clinic, and so on. So there were a lot of things that were predicted to me beforehand.
It's just amazing. Out of the worst experience that we can imagine, there is a beauty and grace. You were blessed with those premonitions, with being able to connect to your daughter at an age where she could communicate. I mean, as horrible as that was, and I know that's something that grief never goes away, of having, had a pregnancy loss, several pregnancy losses myself. But
Okay.
but yeah, to be able to see her and communicate with her, that's something the rest of us don't get that have lost children. We honestly,
Yeah.
most of us don't get that. And that is huge. That is a gift. That is a jewel that you were given to help prepare you, to help you give you clarity later because of those premonitions. And to be able to communicate with her, as hard as I know it still was. I mean, it doesn't matter. I know it feels like it doesn't matter because it's such a big loss, but ultimately it does matter. And I'm sure the more you let that sink in, what you were given, it probably matters more.
Yes, and I totally agree. I'm sure that my daughter had the privilege to show me in the Hall of Truth, not only something that was, important for her and me to connect and to realize how important the state of our soul is on the other side. In the Hall of Truth, I was shown the way that everybody will be judged, having their life result given to them. And to be honest, it was horrible to see that emotional state of anger, hurt, and disbelief, and all these inner accusations, this hatred and this fury against my fate and God and my husband just seemed to accumulate so much negative impact on my soul. In this setting, in the Hall of Truth, I was shown the scales of life, and I saw the bunches of sins that I had, produced in my life. And the way those bunches of sins looked showed me what my sins were like. And I was also shown the bunches of sins my husband had, produced up to that point in his life. And so the interesting thing was that I realized I had got the explanation why so many people have NDEs and are sent back. Because typically when they are told why they are sent back, if they don't wish to come back, they get two different answers. One of the answers is, it's not your time yet. And the other answer is, you are still... Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I heard a click. I don't know what that was, but I still hear you. Can you hear me?
My screen went blank, so for some reason it was gone for a second.
Okay.
Anyway, I saw that the second reason is there's still something that you have to do in your life. So there's some tasks to fulfill in your life. So you have to come back from an NDE because of that. And I realized that the way I was shown the scales of life, this means one answer is about quantity and one answer is about quality. So the quantity explanation is, it's not your time yet, meaning you must stay for another amount of time, for some amount of time that is given to you. And the second explanation is, you must have some other tasks fulfilled before you are allowed to come back, to transition to the other side, meaning the quality explanation. So in essence, our life is measured like a pile of rice. So there's all these little pieces of rice. And if you want to put it in a time frame, it's a minute is a piece of rice, or an hour of our life is a piece of rice. So all these little grains make up the sum of our life's time. It's like measured grains, you know what I mean? And if the grains are good and okay, they are taken through a grid, like a sieve. Everything that falls through, everything that's fine, just falls through and is okay. But your sins, like my sins, were like something that didn't fit through this grid. And this grid was the difference between our good deeds and our bad deeds. So to me, it felt like, if you have some soil in your garden, and maybe you have a garden, you know what compost is. So there's things that you put on a pile, like all the things that we do in our life are put in a pile, and they're left to go through a transformation. And the transformation is making fresh soil from it. And when you want to use that soil, you must put it through a grid and differentiate between the good parts that are small enough to fall through this grid and the big parts like stones or bad things that you don't need, for the good soil that you want to use. So you must just, take them away from the good part. And that's the way that it felt like for me, because on my side of the scales of life, there were small spikes, black, dark spikes like sea urchins. And on my husband's side of the scales of life, there was something like jellyfish. It was, glibbery, gooey, and very soft. So something that had not a lot of structure. And with me, it was too much structure. And I knew that immediately when I looked at it, that it meant, pride, prejudice, even things that when I was judging other people, not even telling them about it, I did not even show how I felt inside. I was still friendly and polite, but on the inside, in my soul, I had some bad thoughts about whatever, it was about something they did or something they said. I was just very judgmental, and all these small spikes, it looked like the essence of all this attitude that I had inside that was sinful on the other side, or was analyzed as sinful. And before I saw the scales of life, I was presented the door of life. That was my husband and me facing each other, standing next to each other, maybe 1 meter apart. We had our hands put up towards each other, touching at the fingertips. And we both had our arms up in a 45-degree angle. So we created a 90-degree angle together. And it looked as if it was a medieval doorway. And when I asked myself, what is this? When I was looking at us, I got the answer, that's the door of life. And I realized that with our connection, physically, but on all other different levels as well, we had created a portal, a door of life for our daughter to walk into her own life through us, And I realized that the wonder of life is shared by all parents on earth, everyone who is connecting to somebody else and having a child together is creating a door of life for this new soul to enter the earthly realm. And it's actually a way that we can share in creation, and it's something that it's holy. And when I was looking at us, it was so moving and so touching, and I realized how we are privileged to be able to take part in that wonder of life. And as soon as I realized that, I saw that coming out of my heart, out of my chest area, were rays of light, and I was enlightening the whole room. And when I looked down at myself, because I felt such a tremendous heat in my chest, and I was wondering what could that be. And I looked down at myself. I saw that there were huge rays of light coming out of my heart towards, one of them was directed towards me, and one of them was directed towards my husband. And when I looked at them, I realized that this was, I asked myself, what is this that's coming out of me? And the answer was, that's love. And I was astonished and, shocked to see that. And I asked myself, this can't be, just from myself. It felt strange, and I couldn't believe it. And when I tried to analyze what was happening, I realized that where I was standing on the other side in eternity was the place that our daughter would be standing, looking at us. And I was allowed to see her view of us. And I was allowed to see that she loved me with a huge amount of love, and she loved my husband with the same amount of love. And just realizing that she loved both parents equally was a shock to me, because up to then I had this attitude that as a mother, I'm so much more important than my husband, her father, just, out of a natural idea that I would be closer to my child than he would be. And when I was standing in this hall of truth, I realized that it's all nonsense. It's not true. It's an illusion, because I realized that the child that is half of my husband and half of me, 50% of her genetic material is from his side and half of it is from mine. How could she just love me so much more than him? Doesn't make any sense. When I was looking at it from, her perspective on the other side, I realized that the truth is not what we make up on this side. It's just an illusion to think that we are more important than the fathers as mothers. And it's also wrong if fathers think that they are more important than the mothers, because in some cultures it's the other way around. So both of those cultures are wrong, because actually just naturally and biologically, we see that from the eternity side, of course, it's equality, and nobody seems to realize it. And when I was full of understanding for what I was shown, I was able and allowed to look inside of me and to look inside of my husband. So it appeared like everything that was connected with our outward appearance was still there, but it didn't matter anymore. And I looked into my character traits and into my husband's character traits. It felt as if there was an analyzation that wasn't connected to me, but I was just allowed to witness it. And it was in percentages, different aspects of our character traits, like patience, love, understanding, empathy, understanding for others' standpoints, or determination, and all kinds of other character traits. I've listed all of what I have remembered in my book. There were lots and lots of them. And it was so fast, going on so fast. I was switching from my side to my husband's side and back again. And when I was able to see that, I realized that even though our character traits were totally different, that obviously I had forgotten that he had some very good character traits as well. So my attitude towards him was distorted. I just saw the bad things, the bad character traits, and I didn't pay any attention to the good that is in him. And in this Hall of Truth, I was forced to see that I had some good sides and he had some good sides. And essentially, there was no one ahead of the other one. So from eternity's side, we are calculated in an even way, in a fair way, even if we don't realize that on this side. We don't have the good perception of the other side in this life.
Now, you said that you were upset with him because you felt he abandoned you. Was that because he wasn't allowed to see you because of the questions they had for him about what happened to you? Am I misunderstanding?
It was right after the accident. And I told him we must go to the hospital, and he should have gotten ready our toddler girl and help me go to the hospital and take me in our car. But unfortunately, it was in the middle of the night. So he didn't feel like it. And up to then, he never had to help with our toddler girl. He never dressed her on his own. I always did the whole things that concerned our toddler. And so he had no idea how she would have to be dressed. And he was just asking me to do it by myself. And I said to him, I was in such tremendous pain because I had
I think any wife would be upset with their husband in that situation.
Now, the problem was that I had such severe pain that I actually blacked out of pain right after hitting this bathtub, this side of the bathtub. So I was laying on the floor. And when I came to, I had so much pain because my uterus had been, the lining of, I don't know, the amniotic fluid is part of the uterus. And then there's this, I don't know the word for it, but it's like, it looks like a pizza a little bit. And the baby is, gets the food and everything out of it.
Placenta.
And it's full of, the placenta was ripped off my uterus, the side of my uterus. So I was bleeding internally, and there was this huge wound in my uterus, and so the amniotic fluid and the blood were just mingling, and it hurt so much that I had nearly no strength to walk. So it was horrible for me, but he was gone. So first I thought he was just gone outside to smoke, but when I called him, he didn't answer. So I got our toddler ready. I went downstairs in front of our house when I realized that our car is gone. So I had to go back up, get my phone and call him. So this was all this tremendous strength that I had to show in this situation was part of why I wasn't able to stop bleeding internally. So these doctors used 2 hours straight to try to get this internal bleeding to stop, but they couldn't. And part of it was because I had too much pressure during the time when I tried to get a hold of him, and I was bleeding too much during this time. So it was so much strain on my body that I was actually nearly dead on the operating table. And what they tried to do was to let me die in the ICU, waiting and hoping for the people who would come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, so that the blame would go to the new doctors that would come in the morning, you know. And my ICU occurred during the night, and in my my NDE occurred during the night. And in my NDE, in my last stage of my NDE, I was on a mountain path, and suddenly there was a huge rock, black rock in my way. And I knew I had no way to escape from it on neither the left nor the right side. I couldn't turn back because it would just start to roll and crush me. And in this situation was when I realized it's about me. I'm in life danger, and my daughter had tried to help me and support me to, get things turned around, but I just wouldn't listen. And what I have learned in the Hall of Truth was that my whole perception was wrong. I was in need of forgiveness just as much as my husband was. That's what I realized in the Hall of Truth. And it was horrible because I was internally in my soul, I was screaming for help, but I didn't say anything. I was so devastated and overwhelmed that I didn't dare utter a single word. I was standing there, I was crying, my tears were running down my cheeks. In the Hall of Truth, I realized it's about my own life result. As soon as I saw the scales of life, I realized that I had been concentrating on my husband's side of the scales of life. But when I was confronted with the truth about my own life result and seeing how much since I produced, I was not interested in anyone else anymore. I was just interested in myself and actually getting forgiveness for myself. And as much as I forgave myself, as much as I knew I would forgive myself in an instant, I realized that on the other side, I wasn't allowed to interfere with this result anymore. I realized that I should have had all this remorse and all these regrets and, realizing I had to repent for my own good, because I had a lot of bad things accumulated, just during the very last moments of my life before I transitioned. And it was heartbreaking. I realized I need forgiveness, not from myself, but from somebody else. And I realized as much as I wished I would be forgiven, I wasn't. And I had always got very good grades during my life. And now in this situation, in this Hall of Truth, in front of these scales of life, I realized that the only important result in my whole life was this result right now. It was about my whole life, and I failed. And I failed miserably, to be honest. I failed so badly that I was so ashamed about it that I couldn't even put it in words. It was devastating. And it was all about these negative things that I took with me. And I realized that most people, when they die, their emotional state reflects the emotional state of their whole life. But with me, because of this very important accident and all these things that happened, my emotional state didn't reflect my whole life, but it did matter as if it would reflect my whole life. And when I was in front of these scales, I was constantly thinking, oh my God, how can I repair this? How could I ever get this straight? I want to set this straight. I need a second chance. I was constantly thinking, that's unbearable. I can't change anything anymore. And the most horrible thing was this feeling of not being able to change it for the better. It was final. And what I had understood in this hall of truth is that our whole life is like a test, like a written exam. Everybody gets his own written exam according to his or her condition. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross once said, God is a great teacher and we are all his pupils. We are all his students. Some of us learn how to read and write. Some of us are taking our final exams, and everyone in between. And so nobody knows about the other one. And as it is with my daughter, she appeared to be a helpless baby girl, totally, disabled and handicapped for life. She would have never regained consciousness. But on the other side, she was a totally patient, intelligent, determined young lady trying to be my spiritual mentor, my tutor, my leader, and my teacher. And I realized later on, even in our discussion, I realized that she has so much more information about the situation than I have. And I realized that she's so far ahead of me. For instance, once she told me, I can forgive as well. And with me, it's about my whole life. It's not only about, something that occurred just recently. And so I said to her, my answer to her was, yeah, well, this doesn't say anything else, then you are a lot better in forgiving than I am. So I was, still in my answer to her, there is this pride, there is this, just pushing it away, what she's trying to tell me. And only later on, I realized that she was telling me she was at peace with her life and with her death. She was able to forgive everyone involved, and about everything that happened, all the circumstances were fine with her. And just to realize that later on made me see how beautiful her soul was. And to be honest, later on, I realized that I was privileged to have been reached by her for this short amount of time in my life, that her her being touched mine is actually a privilege on my side. It felt like, to be honest, like royalty. I felt like she was a princess or a queen on the other side, and she came into my life. It would have been a blessing for a longer period of time, but as it was, she still did so much good in this short time that she shared with me and my family. It was a privilege to be able to be honored by her appearance and her presence in our lives. And I think that goes for all of our children that come into our lives for a very short time span. I think actually they are touching our lives with their love. We don't always feel it, but they come into our life with a blessing, with saying, I love you with all my heart, even if they are not able to say it, physically as babies, but they are still saying it as souls on the other side. And when I was looking at myself, my life result in this hall of truth, I realized that actually this test that we have to pass in our life is important for the other side, not only for our own fate, but for the other side. They rely on us to do our best in our life's tests. And so when people are sent back after their NDE or in their NDE, and it's told, it's not your time yet, means that maybe they have answered all of these questions on their life's test, but they haven't answered, sufficiently enough. So they could do a little bit better to get a better grade. And the people who have been told, you need to go back because there's some tasks to fulfill, most of the time it's some future children to be born, or even their NDE to be shared, because it's important, for the rest of humanity to be aware that there is eternity, and what we think matters in this life is a lot different from what really matters. So there must be maybe 4 or 5 of their test questions have been answered, but there are important questions that they still have to answer to get a good grade to pass. And when I was in this Hall of Truth, I realized I flunked it. I mean, I tried to do my best, and now this is the only important result that I would ever have to come up with in my whole life, and I didn't do any good in the end. So this, the last couple of moments in my life and the circumstances of the accident and everything that happened in the clinic and afterwards was so bad that it would never have been able to repair. On the other side, I could just look back and realize I should have repented before I was transitioning. So I should have said to myself, it's not okay to judge my husband. I wasn't in his shoes. He might have had some reason for why he did that. He didn't mean any harm. And that's what my daughter also told me in our telepathic discussion. She said to me, when I said to her, how could he abandon us in this situation? I've always done my best. And what does he do? I mean, he's just leaving. And she said, maybe he didn't do it on purpose. And once she had said that, I realized she was right. Of course, he didn't do it on purpose. He didn't mean any harm. And he wasn't aware that we were in life danger. Of course not. And so that was my attitude in the Hall of Truth. And I said to myself, my only wish is to be able to put it all right, to set it straight, and to get a second chance. And then when I had this impression that I had understood everything in this Hall of Truth, I was catapulted out of it onto the mountain. Then I saw this huge black rock in my way, in my path, and I realized I'm in life danger. And I was so horrified, to be honest, I couldn't get another straight thought. And I was just staring at this black rock that was huge, way taller than myself. And I was looking at it and I knew that's it. This is it. My spiritual path is over. This is it. And I was so horrified. I had just a blank in my brain. And suddenly I heard, like in our telepathic discussion, an audible memory of what my daughter had repeatedly told me, forgive him, forgive him. So she constantly repeated it in our telepathic discussion. And suddenly I remembered that. And once I remembered it, I realized what she meant to say was, my only chance is to forgive him. This is my only chance to save myself. And suddenly I realized that she was constantly trying to put something in front of me, like a life-saving rope or something, or a life-saving thing out on sea when you're about to drown. So I took a grip of that life-saving note of hers in the back of my head, saying, forgive him, forgive him. So I realized, oh, I must forgive him. So I decided immediately, I'll forgive him. It was just an instant decision. I realized it was my only chance. And I said aloud, I forgive him. And I remember I breathed in and I breathed out, and I was feeling a huge relief, and it felt so natural to forgive him. And it was so easy. I couldn't have ever imagined how easy it was. Obviously, it was just a decision to make. And before, it had felt like I would forgive him just for the sake of him. So I would like bend down to him and say, oh, you're right. In my pride, I grant you forgiveness, out of grace and out of being so much better. But after being in the Hall of Truth, I realized I had no right to not forgive him, because I needed forgiveness just as he needed it. So we were actually equal on this forgiveness scale. So when I had forgiven him and said that, all of a sudden this huge black rock started to roll downhill in front of me, out of my path, and my path was clear again. I was so astonished. I watched it roll downhill and crush against the mountainside. And when my path was clear, of course, I just wanted to finish my path to the top of this mountain. So I took a few steps, and before I could reach this wooden fence that obviously was a symbol for the difference between this life and the other life for good. And before I could reach that, I was catapulted back. I had tears on my cheeks. I was just, crying silently. I was in a state of happiness and bliss that I had never experienced before. It felt as if I had been forgiven everything that I had ever done wrong in my whole life up to then. It was so overwhelming. I felt like I didn't even deserve the forgiveness that I had been granted, obviously, automatically, because I had forgiven him. And the next moment I was back and I knew I was forgiven myself as well. And I realized that I had experienced the most amazing thing. And I had experienced something like a spiritual washing machine. I was going into this NDE with the most negative state, emotional state imaginable. And I came out of it with the best emotional state imaginable. And I felt like nobody could have done that but an NDE just confronting me with the truth in the hall of truth, that I needed forgiveness just as my husband did, and that I couldn't meddle with something that was the truth. So I had to just accept it. And it was humbling, as well as, giving me some important insights. What I wanted to do right after my NDE is I grabbed my phone and I sent my husband a short message telling him two things: that I was not mad with him anymore. Everything was fine. I was sure that my daughter was mentally and physically handicapped, because she had told me that she can forgive everything. And of course, I realized that she meant her physical state as well, so she could accept what the consequences were for her after this accident. And I told him she will be handicapped, but if we just accept our fate, there is no problem. So the problem is just when you're fighting against what you're set up with, in life. If you accept
So she
it,
was
it's
still
okay.
alive then.
She was still alive, but she had no brain functions. She just had a heartbeat, and she was actually just a little bit more than clinically dead that she had been before. And right after me sending this short message to my husband, actually making peace with him, a few moments later, I realized that my heart was starting to beat frantically. And I realized that's not my heartbeat, it's her heartbeat. That, like in my NDE, she was sharing with me what was going on. And so actually I was privileged and allowed to share her last hour of life with her, because immediately I realized that her state was deteriorating. And afterwards, I realized, as soon as I had sent this short message and made peace with my husband, her mission was over. I mean, her mission was accomplished and she was free to go. I realized later on she must have made this decision to come back after she had been clinically dead, to give us some time to try to reach out to me and change the situation for the better and try to make peace. And that's what she actually did. She was successful in that. And obviously this was why she had to come back, or maybe she decided on her own. I think it was her free will, her free decision to come back for our sake and out of love for us, for her family. And as soon as
Are
she
you
had
still
done
with your
that,
husband?
she was able to, yes, and she was allowed to leave. And so I realized that her physical state was deteriorating, and I wanted some clarity on that. So I was asking for a Bible, and first they didn't want to give me one, but then a very young nurse was getting a Bible for me. So she gave me that Bible, and I decided to read the Psalm of my daughter's birthday as if it was a message from her to me, telling me what her situation is about. And it was spot on. And I was actually reading the Psalm and realizing that it was her last hour in life, that she was dying, and that obviously I was able to support her in this stage of her life. And I was reading the Psalm, and there was full clarity for me that this was the hour of her impending death. And later on, it was confirmed. I was told about an hour later that she had died, and she had actually died, during those minutes when I was reading the psalm of her birthday. So it was something that, I will always remember, that I had some assurance from a Bible. I hadn't read a Bible in years, but I had this urge to, get some confirmation about her state, and I was given that as well. And just because I wanted to see her for one last time after she had passed, I was asked if I wanted to be brought to the other clinic, to see her for one last time, because I had never been allowed to hold her in my hands when she was born. So I had never really seen her face from up front. I'd just seen her from the side, just in her little incubator, just before she was taken to the other clinic. And just because I wanted to see her for this one last time, I had to get some checkups, that they were just normal checkups, routine checkups. And that's when they found out that I was bleeding internally and in the process of dying. And I had to get another emergency operation immediately to stop that bleeding. And this one was successful. And I think it all came back to my NDE, making this important decision to change my attitude that changed my life, and that actually saved my life for good. And it was a huge blessing and a huge privilege what had happened, but it was something so personal and so spiritually valid and so holy for me that I was not able to share it for quite some time. I told my husband about a week later when I was dismissed from the hospital. And I want to mention that I had some after death contact as well. When I visited my daughter in the funeral home for the first time, I was able to hold her in my arms. I had to sit down on a chair because I wasn't allowed to hold something that heavy with her little coffin. My husband didn't want to pick her up because she had some processing done. She was cut up and sewed back up because the reason for her death, they wanted to find a medical reason of her death, and so they had to do that without even asking us as parents. But actually it didn't matter. We, as mother and father, my husband accompanied me. We just saw the beauty of our child, and I was so happy to finally hold her in my arms, even if it was in her coffin. It was, the deepest grief, but at the same time, it was also the deepest happiness and the deepest contentment to finally be reunited with her on a physical level and to see her face for the first time. And as I was looking at her, looking at her features and knowing that, this might be the first and last time to see her before she was buried, I heard her voice telling me, "Mom, don't be so sad. I'm so glad that everything's over." And I was puzzled, of course, because it was just a telepathic message from her. But later on, I realized that what she meant to say was that she was okay with her fate, and she was okay with having transitioned. And the things that she had to experience, outside of my body, the whole resuscitation and all these machines that were trying to keep her alive. And I had been with her in this 1 hour that she lived after our NDE, and I felt this struggle. It felt like a struggle to push away all these strong machines that kept her from, cutting herself free in a way. And I realized that she's not only near and that she's aware of what I'm thinking and feeling, but also that she would love to console me and wants for me to, get on with life in a way. And I realized that the biggest wish that our children have once they are deceased is that we actually are thankful for the time we had with our children. The short time that we had, it was actually not a punishment to be left without them. It was actually a blessing to be granted their presence in the first place. And they're still with us. They love us just the same, even though they are not alive anymore on this side. They are alive on the other side, and they care very much about our attitude and about the state of our soul. And they wish for us to find purpose, meaning, and happiness in life again. Even though they are gone, they know that they will see us someday. And to be honest, they are on the safe side. It's about us. We have to actually worry about us being able to pass the test of life at the end of our life. That's what should be our biggest concern, so that we are actually able to be reunited with them at the end of our life when our final days are come.
Thank you. This is such a wonderful
Thank you too.
message for people that have lost children, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I appreciate your time, and I apologize to the audience for they not be able to see you, but you have a good message, and I think it's very important that we get it out there. And you have a very Merry Christmas, okay?
You too, and Merry Christmas to everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.